Hiya, I'm Ash. I make things and animate them. Last time I made some trees, and before that, some felt. This time it's getting good. I'm making a treehouse for this set that opens. It's like a dollhouse for a puppet. My inspiration for this puppet house comes from the pollard trees in the countryside here. They look weird because their branches get chopped every few years for firewood, but the tree gets to keep growing. Thus, thick trunks. This is my vibe. And also, it's an oak, and I want my tree to be a giant hollow willow. Okay, let's go. I'm using paper mache, so I'm gonna start with a skeleton made from cardboard pieces taped together. Then, I add some packing paper, PVA glue, a paintbrush, and some water. I paint some glue on the paper and roll it up. I put some glue on the tube too, but avoid the entrance. I stick that roll on, then each piece gets more glue for strength. It's easier to twist when it's wet, so I spray it down to shape it on the tree. I keep going, twisting the elements in place. I let it dry a few times to make sure the cardboard doesn't get too wet. Full disclosure, sometimes I have to staple them on. To support the little branches on top, I just stick little pieces of wood like coffee stirrers in the cardboard and build up from there. I do these spirals all the way around, but keep a part at the back clear so that I can make a hinge here. But that's a future me problem. Once I've gone all the way around and it's dry, I seal off the bumps with some more paper strips. I cut it open and test the concept. If my arm wasn't in the way, you'd even see that it works. And Rook fits. One thing before I start the paper mache is this joint back here is a little bit wonky. Really love the look of this, but unfortunately almost all the texture's gotta go. There's a sacrificial glue container. I should probably use gloves for this rather than getting it all over my fingers, but I have to stand up to get gloves. Yay! A bit more paper mache and I can make use of the fire to speed up my drying. This is so much faster, like a little trunk rotisserie. I probably have 5 or 6 layers of paper mache on this by now, but it's dry, fully, and it opens. What is this? The next part is exciting. I need to remove the cardboard on the inside and then somehow hope that I can pry the paper strips out that gave it its shape to start with. It's gonna be difficult because it's taped and stapled and glued in there. No time like the present, right? I got stuck pulling out some of these bits, so I had to call in some help. Without the cardboard tube, the sides have split apart. Then I did the final bits of cleanup myself. I've got a few thin patches here, and here, and here. The inside's a bit rough, so I add some more paper strips until it's nice and smooth. I also add on a bit along the back for some extra hinge space. To prepare for the hinges more, I reshape the sides with some water and clips. For the hinge to bend nicely, the edges need to be parallel. Alright, so here it is after a whole lot of reshaping by wetting and drying. And while the sides are parallel, the edge could be straighter. So I trace a ruler and cut off the excess. So all of this is a patch that I've already added on before so that I could make this nice and straight. I think it turned out good. It was a good idea to try. Let's see if it turns out to be a good solution in the end. This is pretty hard to cut. Now I can align the edges. Wow. Okay, so I have a lot of feelings about this as a connection. It's not very flat, and no parts of it directly meet up. Oh wow, I'm so pale that I am a reflector. That's great. I love that for me. Less obvious, I mean, no it's not. It's just as obvious. Wow. Anyway, I'm using these hinges from Sophie and Toffee in my stash. They fold all the way open and shut, so they'll be perfect. But I don't need the screws. I am going to use 3 of these hinges. I stick them with hot glue temporarily so they're level for my sturdy base. I use foam core for that, and I add this little bit to the bottom of the tree to keep it stable. I cut out this little bit on the side for the part of the trunk that opens. I work with half the trunk at a time to make sure the glue doesn't cool before I finish. Once I know it works, I can clean up a few of the edges. A bit more trimming on the inside, and this mechanism works. So I love it. It opens, but the problem of interest at the moment is you can see a little bit of light through here, and I don't want this to look like an obvious gap. I'm gonna use some water and some little clippy clips to shape this. So I'm gonna use a piece of plastic in between the two to keep them from sticking to each other. Yes, this is like a haunted muff. Okay, so I've got the clips. I'm gonna put this in front of the fire and then we'll see what happens. Okay, it's a couple hours later. This thing is dry. My hair is dry. Let's see how this turned out. Take out the clips. Plastic, you get the first view. Ooh. Hey, that's actually pretty nice. It's nicer than I thought. Basically, it's perfect. The dilemma is these little edges here and inside on the bottom. So, got this. This paper pulp comes from egg cartons that I soaked overnight and then put in a blender. I've used 2 pounds of glue this year. It's been a good year to use glue. Looks like I need to order some more PVA. Thanks, patrons. Keeping me in my PVA habit. Thanks, guys. If you want to see me use this stuff, you can check out my angler video. Otherwise, we'll move on. When the bottom is flush, I can take off the hinges and glue with my heat gun. I'll show you this part later because I get a chance for better footage. But I clean up the stray bits with more paper strips. I use the cap from my empty PVA container to trace the window. I do 2 coats of gesso, and I really should have just base coated this black, but I didn't. I fight with myself over the color. Really loving the color so much. Let's keep going. I want to start with a matte varnish. Oh no. I'm recording all this, which means I'm going to be looking back at myself doing this in the future. Being like, girlfriend, why are you such a mess? And I'm going to be looking back at myself like, girlfriend, at least a couple of my lessons have been learned in that I'm going to start from the back. Start from the back. Okay, so this is the problem, is that my brush wasn't clean. I'm a gremlin. Using gluey lumpy water because getting more water means I have to walk downstairs, which we don't do around here. What you have is this gross sheet of plastic that I've been using throughout this whole project. Saving my modesty. I would move it closer, but I have the wrong lens on for this, and as you can see, my hands are in a state of cleanliness where I would love to smear them all over my expensive camera. Oh, that's a gross bit. While that dries, I'm gonna start on the other props for the inside. Flake, get off. So, it turns out the matte varnish is pretty good at staining. I can't get the paint off, but that's okay. We'll just go with it. The next thing I want to do is make this little guy in here. I use the plastic container my heat gun came in and chop out the parts for the furnace. Nice. Okay, it's pretty fluff and cute as a shape. I keep building with more plastic until it's time to embellish. So I don't have a tool for picking up rhinestones, but what I do have is a little bit of leftover parafilm. Basically, it's like a fine wax. I wrapped some of that around the edge of this. You could probably just use whatever wax you had lying around, like those Babybel wrappers or whatever. This is a rhinestone. This is my thing. I'm gonna squeeze it on there and it picks it up just fine. This is some CA glue. That's the bottom of a yogurt dish. Cool. I need to stop lending my paints to messy gremlins. So I textured my paint with some bicarbonate. I just used black and white paint mixed together to get a gray, and now it's just gonna sit and dry, I hope. Meanwhile, I did some unspeakable things to a tea light so I can light it up on the inside. It also flickers. I didn't know it was supposed to flicker, but that'll be fine. Using some thick string and florist's wire, I make a little basket following this YouTube tutorial, but mine's not as perfect. The basic idea is to have an odd number of wires connected at the middle so that every time you do a circuit around, the thread will swap between being under or over, you know, weaving. I painted a bit to help hide the wire, and then I make it up as I go along for a second basket. I love this one more. I'm surprised how long these take. It's cute. Now, I want to make a moon clock, so I paint a design on some cardboard and then put some gloves on to use UV resin. Oh no! I could swim so much faster. Oh, I hate it. Okay. I seal the cardboard with Mod Podge and then pop the little bubbles in the resin. When it's cured, I add a little face. I want to make a curly bracket to help support some of my shelves, so I pattern it out on paper, make an SVG on the computer, and then cut them out on my Cricut. I glue a stack of these little papers together and then paint them black and gold. I love these little brackets. I make more little books for these shelves. These are the rewards for my top tier patrons that get to have an object in a set. Next, I make a big book. I roll out some sheets of polymer clay and sketch on a design. I add binding marks with a wooden knife. Then when it's painted, I try gluing them on. We'll see it later. So in between painting, which you can tell I have not yet gone downstairs, because it's down the stairs. My first idea is I want there to be a desk at rook's height. So here, I'll have a little shelf on the wall at 10 centimeters, and I can put like 2 or 3 little ones in here, 15, and then something at 20. For shelves, I cut paper like I've lost a pet, but instead of sticking it on a tree, I fold it on the inside of the tree to steal its shape. Close enough, and I make 2 shelves this way. Then I make some polymer clay mushrooms that I built into the tree before baking and painting. Back in the worst timeline, I still can't get all the black paint off my hands. I'm working on the window. I got us one of these. Thanks, patrons! I have been collecting matchsticks. I cut out the pieces for the frame. Here's the finished colored resin window. The tree couldn't open enough for all my shots, so I decided to add a second hinge. I'm running through the same steps as before. I cover this sturdy piece of flat wood with some plastic and clip the damp tree to it. It's much easier the second time, and I get more footage. Because I've flattened out what were a bunch of bumps, it's now uneven, and so now I need to straighten this back up so that the 2 sides will be flush, and I won't have this issue. This is so efficient that I just use scissors. I'm gonna just do the same thing again. And I'm not gonna think too hard about it. I consolidate these nice straight edges with some glue and clip it to dry straight one more time. That's skills, mate. I temporarily stick the hinges on the tree to mark where the holes need to go. These things are really thick. It's like trying to punch through 15 sheets of paper at once. 4 holes per side of the hinge, so I can sew some rice bag thread through and around the tree. I sew the top and then the bottom. And finally the middle. I seal the raw edge with PVA glue and tack down those loose strings with hot glue. This would have been easier before I installed the hinges, but it's fine. Once it's painted, it just disappears right in. Yeah! I went back and forth over how to hide this seam on the inside and eventually just put some thin paper over it. I tested it out folding it and it works fine. I paint the paper to match and I take care of both hinges this way. Now I get to focus on the outside. I paint some paper and make it a little less bright and have some texture. When it's dry, I stick it down to my Cricut mat. It's fine. I glue them together in bunches with hot glue dots that I paint brown after. This tool is a stick that I green stuffed a ball bearing onto. I roll it on the ferns so they look more lifelike, and I use a smaller one for the veins inside the leaves. My heat gun reactivates the hot glue, and I can stick the bunches wherever looks good. I hand cut a bunch of ivy leaves and color them, and then glue them to wire scraps I had left over from the basket. To attach them, I punch holes in the tree with a needle and then push the wire in there. I did the same thing for these little flowers. I spent most of the day painting these lichens, textured with baking soda and detailed all over. Okay, so I'm not a huge fan of the way that some of these little dots are going, so I'm going to just try and follow the bark shape a little bit more and readjust my shapes here. And then I decided I hate it. I'm gonna do something else. So because I put baking soda in it, it now has a funny texture. I don't want to have patches of weird texture underneath that don't match everywhere. I'm just gonna paint them all very quickly with some vinegar to help break up the baking soda, and then I can scrape that texture off easier. So I paint over them with a few shades of brown. Alright, it's time to add in all the items I've made. The inside looks a bit plain, and I remember the tree that I went to visit. It was really beautiful and textural. Really, I thought things were going well, but sacrifices have to be made for art. So I mixed up this color and I don't really like it, but I feel some sense of obligation to finish using it. So I'm painting this thing in these colors that don't seem to go very well together and just whispering to myself, trust the process, over and over. I don't really know what it means, but it seems like that's what artists say when things look bad and then eventually they look good. So I'm hoping it's some kind of black magic chant because I'm open to any kind of help I can get at this point. The base warped from too much black magic, so it's gotta go. It'll also make it easier to stick the puppets down now, so win-win. You know the drill, seal the edges with paper and glue and hide the crimes in paint. Then a couple dark washes and we're ready to put in the small items. This video took me months and will probably be watched fewer hours than it took me to make, so if you've come this far, drop me a like or a comment, it really helps, both in personal motivation and for the algorithm. I can't wait to animate this scene, it's going to be so good, but there's still a couple more things to finish, and in the meantime, I'm moving to a new place that doesn't do this when I walk by. See you next time for the final touches and first animation. Have a great day!